There are loads of great scenes in the 1978 Superman movie, and the film is still very well appreciated. But in recent viewings of the film, one sequence that has stood out to me as being quite unique and underappreciated is the scene of Superman visiting Lois in her rooftop apartment and taking her on a nighttime flight. It's very easy to pass this off as excessively soppy, and nothing more than a prolonged gushing romance sequence that distracts from Superman's fight against crime. But in studying the details, I've now come to the conclusion that the whole flight sequence is basically a metaphor for Lois Lane and Superman having very intimate yet very passionate sex. That's right, and it's very cleverly done. Leading up to this scene, Lois was in a helicopter accident. She fell from a building and was saved mid-fall by Superman. Lois falling will take on a very different meaning during the night flight sequence though. And when he saved her for the first time, she asked who he is, and he replied,
"A friend."
Then in her office she received a handwritten note from a friend asking to meet her at her place at 8 o'clock. Hopefully, it says in the letter. Hopefully what? Hopefully friends with benefits? The romantic interpretation of this letter is emphasised by the boss's question directed at Lois and by her reaction.
Where does he come from? Does he have a girlfriend?
Superman in Clark Kent disguise is watching her reaction to the note, of course. Now the friend could be Clark or Superman, but she's expecting Superman. Now there is a confusing point later in that Clark shows up at Lois's apartment just after her flight with Superman.
Lois, we did have a date tonight, remember?
Oh.
So why would she have a meeting with Superman and a date with Clark Kent arranged pretty much close to the same time on the same night? The answer to this is simple. In the shooting script, Superman just shows up unexpected at her apartment before Clark Kent was due to arrive. But when filming, they changed it so that her meeting with Superman was pre-arranged. And that in turn left a plot hole of her having arrangements with the two guys at once. But it's no big deal. The scene, as it appears in the film, has a lot of changes and additional dialogue that weren't in the shooting script. And the changes make for a much better sequence, as we'll see throughout this video. In the script, Superman's flight with Lois involves him timing his ability to fly around the world. En route, they fly through day and night time zones, passing famous sites like the pyramids and the Great Wall of China. Superman then announces after landing that the trip took just 90 seconds. What we see in the finished movie is very different and a lot more drawn out. The viewing of world sites is scrapped, possibly due to special effects limitations, and instead there's a longer flight sequence occurring entirely at night beneath the full moon. It's much more romantic than what was in the script, and the moment of Lois falling and being caught, that's a new addition that wasn't in the script either. And most of the differences between what was scripted and what was filmed, the changes are geared towards conveying more sexual and emotional passion between Lois and Superman than what was in the script. So let's go through it all in detail from the beginning. First of all, there's a telling continuity error. Close-up of Lois framed against the pretty lights of the nighttime city and the floodlights of her apartment balcony. And she has her makeup on. In her mind, this is a date, not an interview. In fact, Superman's note didn't even specify whether it would be an interview or a date. Smart, seductive move. Create a sense of mystery. Women love that. Cut from the opening close-up shot of her to a wide shot of her on the balcony, and we can see that the view behind her in the close-up should have been of the apartment itself in the background. Now, that little continuity error is no big deal at all, but I mention it specifically because the lights of the nighttime city fake background, and this is a studio set. These lights are used throughout the scene to help convey emotional and sensual stimulation between the characters. Almost like they're surrounded by thousands of glowing candles in a dark room. I mean, if you think about it, would a reporter be able to afford a snazzy top-floor apartment like this all to herself in the big city? Probably not. But this particular setting allows for an open view of the city lights during their date, which gives a visual sparkle to the scene. And there's the little table with the wine, so it's almost like a restaurant with room for only 2 guests. Alright, so she can see that he's 5 minutes late, and she's already starting to worry.
It's 8 o'clock. Some friend. Story of my life. Cinderella bites the dust.
Her costume is interesting. Keeping with the film's sense of taste with regards to children in the audience, Lois is wearing a long white dress that doesn't show any leg at all. In fact, I don't even think it shows any ankle. Her arms and shoulders are showing and some of her back, but she has a veil over them so that they're both exposed and covered at the same time. Not slutty, but not too prudish either. Unusual costume with psychological purpose. Cut to Superman's point of view as he flies to her balcony, and there's an emphasis from his point of view on the pretty lights of the city. Actually, when I described the scene as occurring at night, I was slightly mistaken. This is twilight, or dusk, whichever you want to call it, and it's more romantic than the full blackness of night. And these fake backgrounds throughout the whole scene will continually use dusk and twilight skies, even though the skies should have gone fully dark by the time they return from their flight in the clouds. Being stuck in twilight is unrealistic, but it visually helps maintain the sense of magic and romance. And the music for Superman's arrival here is quite different to his crime-fighting scenes. More romantic. So Superman lands not on the floor but on her wall, standing tall in his vibrant colours against the dazzle of the city lights. Red is dominant in his costume, the most sexual of colours, and in his case it's made even more vibrant by its contrast against blue and yellow. He's like a Christmas present beneath a well-lit tree. The fake background has even been framed to get the moving lights of the traffic of the city that's on the ground into the shot, furthering the sensual dazzle of Superman's arrival. Moving lights instead of just stationary ones. Now, something I love about this scene is that it shows off Superman's super cool personality as opposed to his physical powers. Meeting someone for a date can be nerve-wracking, but Superman knows the psychological ins and outs of what to do. First of all, dates tend to be more stimulating and interesting if they haven't been verbally acknowledged with the label date. The word date creates a sense of pressure, almost like an obligation that the ultimate aim of the meeting is sex or romance. Without the word date having been mentioned, the two parties are more relaxed because they have the option of just seeing how it goes on the night, and if the connection isn't strong enough, then there's less disappointment. But if the connection is strong, then it's a pleasant surprise. So Superman played that very well. But he also does here the timeless, reliable tactic of playing slightly hard to get.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have plans this evening?
Oh, this whole thing, no.
Well, listen, it's no trouble at all for you to come back later.
Don't move!
He gives her the option of backing off out of the meeting, and so her reaction forces her to reveal her definite interest in him. Women hate desperation from men, and so when a guy is as casual about it all as he is, where it's just like it doesn't really matter that much to him, they become even more attracted. Unfortunately, that means sometimes they get attracted to guys who just don't give a shit, but, when a guy's got a healthy independence and he's not desperate for the woman, they love that.
Sorry to drop in on you like this, Miss Lane, but I've been thinking, there must be a lot of questions about me that people in the world would like to know the answers.
Of course, yes.
Keeping up the mystery about whether it's even a date at all, he starts talking about his desire to be interviewed as he moves in closer to her physically. He knows very well he's not really here for the interview, and her stumbling reaction further reveals that an interview is not what was on her mind either. It's notable that in his arrival here, he is twice referred to her as Miss Lane, emphasising her unmarried status.
Good evening, Miss Lane. Sorry to drop in on you like this, Miss Lane, but I've been thinking.
Superman's mastery of basic human psychology continues. On a date, it's nice to have a hell of a lot in common with the other person, but when your date is too agreeable and too polite, it can be off-putting. Superman knows this, of course, and so he delivers a stern but polite chastisement with his hands crossed together.
You really shouldn't smoke, Miss Lane.
This kind of thing is important because on a date where someone has the potential to become a partner, we want them to be a person who will challenge us in good ways, and we want to know that they want what's best for us, even if it means expressing disagreement with us. And it seems he got to her momentarily on this subject because she definitely sparked up that cigarette out of sheer nervousness. Look at the anxious exhale with her back turned to Superman just before she sparks up. But after he tells her she shouldn't smoke, she puts the cigarette out, having taken only one drag of it. After all, smoking can be quite unattractive to a date who is a non-smoker. So Superman x-rays her lungs and says there's no cancer yet. The fact that he looks through her flesh and sees what's inside, well, If he wanted to, he could just look at her heart beating, or he could look at the millions of neurological signals firing off in her brain, or he could even look at her more private, intimate parts. It's pretty damn personal stuff to have a date with someone who can see your literal insides. And yet we also like it in real life when a romantic interest can see through us, so to speak, or see deep down inside of us. I'm not saying that metaphor was necessarily intended here, but I find it interesting anyway. Superman strolls over and politely refuses her offer of a glass of wine.
Would you like a glass of wine?
No thanks. I never drink when I fly.
He probably doesn't drink at all. And refusing a drink on a date is a very confident thing to do as well, because most of us have a drink to calm our nerves and ease inhibitions when we're on a date. The only betrayal of anxiety in Superman that I can see is that his hands are clasped together in an unusual position. Well, it would be hard to hide an erection in that outfit, wouldn't it? He takes a peek into her apartment, her personal space, getting to know her, and the mirrors are important props in the scene, and Superman is specifically framed in one here in this very first shot of the apartment interior. Otherwise the shot would be kind of boring. Surprisingly homey furnishings for such a career-minded woman, and as is usually the case when we compliment someone's home, we're complimenting the owner.
Nice place.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Should we get started with the interview?
So she asks him to sit and get started, but the little pause before the word interview suggested she was thinking of saying, let's get started with our date. Him very slightly adjusting her chair wasn't necessary at all in the practical sense, but it's a gesture that he wants her to be comfortable, not just physically, but comfortable in his presence. Non-verbal communication always important on a date. So down he sits, surprisingly casual in posture, and she proceeds with her interview, although she's turned slightly away from him initially, indicating that she's anxious and not yet ready to connect. But then she throws a surprise at him. Her first questions are whether he has a wife, and then whether he has a girlfriend. In other words, are you romantically available to me?
Let's start with your vital statistics.
Are you married?
No, I'm not.
In response to the marriage question, Superman is momentarily surprised and amused. Maybe her getting so quickly toward her romantic interest in him is what he finds funny. And her sudden turn to face him with that question was kind of abrupt too. Flirtatious even. He answers the marriage question casually, and then she goes for the flirtatious kill with the girlfriend question. And so what does he do? He matches her with an equally abrupt and confident answer.
Do you have a girlfriend?
No, I don't, but if I did, Miss Lane, you'd be the first to know about it.
Now, the extremely underrated actor Christopher Reeve here, he is great with the body language stuff. He slightly shuffles in response to the marriage question, so she actually made him nervous a moment there. And if I'm not mistaken, him averting his eyes and playing with his hands, does he make a sly reference to his ring finger there? I can't quite tell. You know, like he considers her marriage material. And his little gesture of putting his fingertips to his lips, that seems like a nervous desire to bite his nails, or it's an oops, I've just let the cat out the bag gesture. The moment of beaming eye contact and contained smiles, presented with closer shots, this is their little moment of shared acknowledgement. The shields have just been momentarily dropped. Yes, this is a date, and yes, we're both very attracted and interested in each other. It's a great little interaction, very sweet and convincing, but it wasn't in the script. In the script, she just begins by asking what his age is. By the way, remember I said that mirrors are important here? Well, there's one behind Superman here that is reflecting the city lights, maintaining the sensuality framing of Superman himself. From her point of view, he would be framed against that mirror, and it's present in both the wide and close shots of him in this conversation as well. I think the table lamp tilted to shine at the bottom next to the mirror is also done to add visual stimulation to the image, a bit of brightness. And Lois has the city lights and floodlights behind her to match. If these backgrounds had been flat and boring, it would have considerably detracted from the sensuality of this interaction. Now we get another dialogue deviation from the shooting script. She was supposed to ask how old he is, and he was supposed to reply that he's 30. But the lines used in the film are much better.
How old are you?
Over 21.
Oh, I get it. You don't want anyone to know how old. Okay.
That's a smart answer from Superman, and not revealing his age maintains her sense of mystery about him. Next up, another excellent deviation from the shooting script dialogue.
No how, okay. And how big are you? How tall are you?
About 6'4".
Feet or inches. How big are you wasn't in the script, and this is one of the first clear-cut clues that led me to the title of this video. She is just basically asked how big his penis is, definitely one to go over the kids' heads, and the joke is further hidden by the actors playing it straight. I love this because it shows just how much fun the cast and crew were having and how they chose to shoot this scene. They were getting creative and taking little risks, embellishing the sequence beyond what was scripted. I'd love to know exactly who thought that line up, and I suspect it was ad-libbed in rehearsals and then added to the shooting script. By the way, I don't think this one is deliberate, but I find it funny that a phallic wine bottle is visible during this dialogue. Next up, more expansion of the scripted dialogue.
And how much do you weigh?
Around 225.
225?
In the script, he was supposed to just bluntly say that he was 195. Maybe that was changed according to Reeve's physical height and build, but I'm not sure why they have their little moments of confusion over this. Maybe she's weighing up what it would be like to have him on top of her. Now the sexual interest becomes rather blatant.
I assume then that the rest of your bodily functions are normal?
Sorry, beg your pardon?
Well, putting it delicately.
Mm-hmm.
Do you eat?
Yes. Yes, I do. When I'm hungry.
You do? Of course you do. Well,
Their leaning in towards each other adds to the sexual emphasis. But the final couple of lines of this dialogue in the script version were very odd and also quite funny. He says he eats, and she asks if he wants a cookie, and he says what type, she says macaroons, and he says no thanks. What? There must be a macaroon joke that's gone over my head there. But those lines didn't make it into the film. Maybe when they're shooting it, they realised how crazy those lines were. Maybe she should have asked, what do you eat? And he could have replied, well, you know, the usual. Muffins, clams, kebabs. Or maybe they could have had a pussycat run past in the background or something. So anyway, the seduction is on and they both know it. But she's not ready for getting naked yet, so she stands and walks away while continuing the questions. And his smirk says it all. He knows she's playing hard to get. But he's not letting her slip away that easy, so he gets up and follows her. She sees him following and walks away again. And my God, this stuff is so true to life. How many dates get to this kind of stage of openly declared attraction, and then one person says, well, you know, you want to come back to my place, and the other's like, well, I don't know if I should, but the smirking and the flirting reveals the intention that they do actually want to. And then after a little ritual of persuasion and reassurance that, hey, no pressure, it's okay, they say, oh, all right then, and you know, off you go. But you both knew from the very beginning that's where it was all headed. Except in this instance, it's going to play out in a more symbolic sense. She carries on walking away and creating distance, as she seems to be getting all professional by going into journalist mode. Meanwhile, he's holding his clasped hands over his crotch again, boner suppression style. She asks if it's true that he can see through anything, and that he's impervious to pain. Not sure how she knew those things, but rather than actually backing off from a physical encounter, she comes back at him with her most direct sexual invitation yet, spoken from behind a waist-high plant pot.
What color underwear am I wearing?
Right, so she's just basically asked him to symbolically take off her dress and pay attention to her erogenous zones. Again, here we have considerable improvements over what was scripted. In the script, there's no plant pot, and we were supposed to see a flash of Lois Lane wearing nothing but lingerie. I agree with the decision not to show that. It keeps things more family-friendly and tasteful. Plus, the audience would be visualising it themselves anyway, no doubt we all did. And the scripted change results in her reporting to the world that Superman can't see through lead, a weakness that will be exploited by villain Lex Luthor later on. So the change here actually provided a good plot point. So anyway, Lois pretends that she didn't mean to embarrass him.
Oh, I'm sorry, I embarrassed you, didn't I?
Oh, no.
I did.
No, not at all, Miss Lane. It's just that this platter must be made of lead.
Of course she knew. She was flirting, and like any good date, he returns the gesture.
No, I mean like,
Pink.
Huh?
Pink. Sorry, Miss Lane. I didn't mean to embarrass you.
Oh, you didn't embarrass me.
And then her verbal denial claiming that she wasn't embarrassed. That's a very cute lie, and his little smirk close-up reveals that he sees right through it. Oh, incidentally, I find a certain sweet irony in that she asked him if he is impervious to pain, and he said that so far he was. I think that was a bit of an ironic foreshadow of the emotional pain that he'll feel when he finds her dead body in the car wreck later. That's one type of pain that he's not impervious to. Oh, incidentally, another important thing here is that in the script, their whole interview dialogue before he takes her on a flight, it involved the actors just being sat down. But the way they actually filmed it, they had the actors get up and move about on set, and that makes it more visually dynamic. Their choices of posture and where they walk in relation to each other, that usually says a lot about how they are relating, and it adds a bit of visual dynamism when the dialogue becomes boring expository stuff like it does at this moment.
See, I'm from, pretty far away. Another galaxy, as a matter of fact. I come from a planet called Krypton.
with a C-R-I? No.
No, actually, it's Krypton with a K-R-Y, P-T.
Note how she steps toward him, and he mirrors this by stepping toward her. Expression through changes in physical proximity. That's true to life. And that's essential here because we're about to switch to close-up shots as she decides to get away from the interview distraction questions and back onto the subject of sexuality.
K-R-Y. Do you like pink?
I like pink very much, Lois.
Note that he switched from calling her Miss Lane to finally just calling her Lois, more personal name. That's a big change. Her question, however, do you like pink, that was a very odd segue, and her delivery suggests that she just blurted it out without consciously thinking about it. And after all, spontaneous communication is much more intimate, even if it is kind of surreal at times. Ever had someone spontaneously say bizarre things to you during sex? Happens a lot. Note the Twilight Sky emphasis behind Superman here in his close-up too. Gives it a romantic kind of look. And another incredibly subtle visual element to this whole scene is that while it all seems to be constructed set filming, there's a gentle breeze created no doubt by on-set fans placed there deliberately. And that breeze makes the foliage sway about gently, not enough to be consciously noticed, but enough to subliminally give a little kind of effect, that this is a kind of an intimate interaction. And in some shots where the plants are backed by the city lights, the moving leaves creates a gentle sparkle effect with the lights. Now, lesser directors wouldn't even think to have a gentle breeze like that, so there's a lot of subtlety going on here. Back to the acting and dialogue. When they had their intimate acknowledgement of attraction at the table, they responded with slightly embarrassed smirks. But this time, despite the pink reference to her underwear and thus to sexuality, basically she was asking if he likes her sexually, and he clearly does. Despite that revelation, there's no embarrassment this time. There's no looking away, there's no nervous tension. They're comfortable and close enough to kiss. And the music kicks in here to punctuate that the barriers have been broken. There is attraction and trust between them now.
I like pink very much, Lois.
So now the date questions and the interview questions become comfortably merged into one as she asks him a question that she wants to know both personally and as a journalist.
Why are you?
I'm sorry?
Why are you here?
And the lines that follow undoubtedly would make him more attractive to her.
There must be a reason for you to be here.
Yes. I'm here to fight for truth and justice in the American way.
You're going to end up fighting every elected official in this country.
Sure you don't really mean that, Lois?
Cynicism can be quite a turn-off, and that's one of the major appeals of Superman, the fact that he's maintained his positivity, despite the fact that he fights back against all the crime and all the problems that he's been through in his own life, losing 2 fathers and having his race destroyed. He's still a positive guy who has hope for the future. Superman now states with all seriousness that he never lies.
I don't believe this.
Lois?
Hmm?
I never lie.
But of course he does. He lies by pretending to be Clark Kent. So I think what he really means here is that he doesn't tell malicious lies. And also he's letting her know that she can trust him. So things have gotten very personal now in a non-embarrassed way. And so this is the point in a date where you either make a move to become physical or the moment passes and the magic starts to subside.
Oh, just how fast do you fly, by the way?
Why don't we find out?
And how do you propose we do that?
Take a ride with me?
Superstud makes his move. Gently coaxing her and taking her by the hand, he takes her not to the bedroom, but up into the sky for a sexually symbolic encounter. She's going to go for a ride with him. She complains she'll be cold, and he says, "Oh, you'll be warm enough." And she certainly will be, as she'll have his body heat as one would with a naked lover. But before they go off, she raises one last concern that his charms might be an illusion. However, she quite sensitively attributes her doubts to Clark Kent, so as not to hurt Superman's feelings.
Clark said that you're just a figment of somebody's imagination. Like Peter Pan.
In response to this inquiry of whether he's a faker, which I think she means in reference to his superpowers and his sincerity in this date, he gives a great reply.
Peter Pan flew with children, Lois. In a fairy tale.
Well, this isn't kiddie stuff, given that it's a symbolic sexual encounter, and sex is a very basic part of human reality. And finally, off they go, physically embracing in flight, even though she ought to have severe acrophobia after the helicopter incident. And hey, maybe that was just foreplay. Their physical and emotional passion for each other is conveyed through romantic music and the dazzle of the out-of-focus city lights, the sensuality conveyed visually. She looks amazed, but she has actually been above the city in helicopters before, so she shouldn't be that impressed. Couple of phallic twin towers there, only joking. And then the Statue of Liberty flyover. I have two interpretations for this. She voiced her cynical view that all politicians are corrupt, and so he's showing her the glorious Statue of Liberty, symbol of the United States, to remind her of the values that the country is about. Or at least he thinks it's about that. I'm not going to get into arguments with you guys about the merits of the United States. I love the United States in some ways, in other ways I think it's terrible. But anyway, this isn't a political video. And anyway, my other interpretation is that, being that this is a female statue, he's sort of making a statement that he idolises Lois, as like, look, this is how beautiful you are. And people like to be made to feel special by their lover, don't they? Whatever the intended meaning here, it's obviously an important moment in the film because a fair bit of screen time is devoted to them circling around the Statue of Liberty. Up into the clouds they go now, emerging from what may as well be a giant fluffy bed. Moonlit for romance, of course, and that's the full moon. No dialogue between them for this sequence, just smiles and gestures. And now an unscripted part of the sequence. Remember, in the script, this was supposed to be a round the world in 90 seconds tour of famous sites, which, you know, it's kind of cool, but not exactly personal and romantic and intimate. But here in the film, Superman urges her to adopt a flying pose like him, and somehow she's able to, which she should just be falling, so it's kind of a magical framing here. And being that it's all symbolic anyway, it's like a dream, why not? They hold hands, and then he takes the very risky move of holding onto her by fingertips, and then her hand slips completely from his and she falls. As she screams in free fall until he swoops down and catches her, and then immediately they embrace up close as if they're kissing. Isn't it funny how she just recovers instantly from the absolute terror of falling in the sky, and then as soon as he grabs her, it's like, oh, wow, that was great. And my interpretation of this freefall moment is on two levels, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I strongly suspect it. The first is that Superman intentionally let her fall for a moment so that he could catch and embrace her more intimately. My second interpretation is that the falling moment is basically a metaphor for a cry of sexual passion from her. Yes, an orgasm, to put it bluntly. And their embrace immediately after is essentially the afterglow of lovemaking. Now you might be thinking, come on Rob, get your mind out the gutter. Well, let's carry on and see what happens next. We have some visual dissolves in the embrace afterglow to create a sense of time distortion, and that is something that goes on with lovemaking. Sometimes an hour can seem like 10 minutes or vice versa. Dissolves that occur between shots in the same scene usually are done to achieve a time distortion effect. The moon, bloated in size, gives a sort of unreal fantasy feel to this whole thing. And the fallen capture is followed by a sudden introduction of Lois Lane's internal dialogue, which sounds like the afterglow ramblings of someone who's just fallen in love after sleeping with their date for the first time. And when I say sleeping with, I mean, yes, having sex with them. Note the sexual implications of the dialogue.
Can you read my mind? Do you know what it is that you do to me? Well, you look at me, quivering, like a little girl, shivering. Can you picture the things I'm thinking of?
Yeah, I think we can all picture what you're thinking of.
You and I could belong to each other. If you need a friend, I'm the one to fly to. If you need to be loved, here I am. Read my mind.
Friends with benefits, folks. Friends with benefits. So, ever so gently he lands, eases her down, and the gushing afterglow moment again. And now the friends with benefits thing is established quite bluntly by Superman.
Oh, we forgot to time ourselves. Oh well, maybe next time.
Oh.
And they have a very formal goodnight dialogue, but their eyes say the rest. So he's had his way and now he's off. And she now coins the name Superman. And Superman will quickly return to her door here as Clark Kent. And Kent makes a jokey allusion to flight.
Well, let's push off, shall we?
Caught between his two identities, as symbolised by his mirror image in the same shot, he almost reveals the truth and then decides against it. Now, if you're still not willing to think of the whole flight sequence as a metaphor for Superman and Lois Lane engaging in passionate sex and lovemaking, then check out the headline of her newspaper article about it the next day. I spent the night with Superman. She certainly did. She banged him. He slotted his meat. They went up and down on each other and all the rest of it. Now, I don't even like rom-coms generally, but I find this interview date flight sequence incredibly powerful. Of course, great acting is essential, and both Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder are fabulous here. They pull it off, so to speak. And it's all quite funny as well once you start getting the little innuendos. But anyway, crude jokes aside, it's an amazing sequence. I can think of no other movie sequence that so aptly captures all the emotional magic of a really good date leading to a first sexual encounter with that person, and the gushing joy of thinking, wow, I might have just met the love of my life. Not that I'm saying a first sexual encounter should be the deciding factor, of course, but yeah, this scene, in surrealist form, catches those very basic human traits of love, sex and romance, and it presents them with surprising intricacy and sincerity. But it does this in a dual narrative way, so the kids can watch the scene and not realise what the hell is being implied, and probably a lot of adults didn't consciously get it either. But for both kids and adults, the emotional connection aspect of the sequence comes across anyway, very strongly. There's great artistry here. The two characters don't even kiss in the scene, not once, but their close-up gushing eye contact is as good as a kiss. And yet to pretend that sexuality and even raw lust doesn't form part of the equation would be a lie, and that's one of the reasons that I find most movie depictions of romance to be kinda lame. A lot of them shy away from the lust element. So, at the subliminal communication level, I consider this to be a very honest scene communicating that particular human truth that love and lust are equal components of the romance experience. By the way, folks, just as a point of comparison, go and watch the sex scene between Clark Kent and Lois Lane in the movie Batman vs. Superman. Compare it to what we got in the Superman 1978 movie. The new sex scene is just completely lacking in subtlety, artistry. It's all very blatant. There's no attempt to make the scene something that would work for adults and for kids. It's really lame. And, that's a good comparison between a creative approach to filmmaking that is mature and sensitive to the needs of the audience in a family film, and a movie that is extremely cynical and just goes for cheap thrills. Oh, and before I go, I just want to mention something about Christopher Reeve. I mean, he's one of my favourite actors. I think he's really good. Such a shame that he got typecast. But he did do some very, very good movies on the side of some great performances. And one that I highly recommend if you're not familiar with Christopher Reeve's work outside of Superman and how good an actor he was, then go and check out this movie starring Christopher Reeve and Michael Caine called Death Trap. It's really, really good. You really get to see Christopher Reeve given a variety of emotional performance in that particular film, so go and check that out. You've been listening to Rob Ager. If this is your first date with me and my work and you'd like more, then do subscribe. Consider supporting me on Patreon and check out my vast catalogue of film analysis and psychology related articles and videos at my website collativelearning.com. And if you want more regular updates, then follow me on Facebook and Twitter. All the links are in the video description below.